Console wars. They have been part of the console landscape for as long as I can remember. It has shaped a lot of what the video game industry is today, and heavily influences people's choices. I personally found it kinda silly, since I found it to be just a petty squabble about what piece of hardware is better, based almost exclusively on external things. For me, playing on a PS5 is the same as playing on an Xbox Series X, with the thing that could differentiate one from the other being what games I can play on each machine. So instead of talking about console wars, I shall instead talk about what I think are the failures and come up with possible solutions. As a start, one of their failures that I feel needs to be talked about is how both remain uncommitted when it comes to attempts at innovation, as well as their parent company focusing on profits over games. The PS4 and the Xbox One era brought about the PlayStation Move and Kinect respectively, but were poorly supported during their lifetimes. Aside from lightly supplementing any popular release, they rarely had any new IPs tied to the tech, instead beating on an overused drum by focusing on music and exercise. It also didn't help that there was an arbitrary need to move on from that generation, giving developers scant time to optimize game development using any of the hardware available, or the opportunity to explore more ideas that could make the most of it. That is why it wouldn't be surprising to consider that the current console generation barely innovated over their predecessors, as well as running into the same problems. And sure, there might have been some breakthroughs in hardware design and device architecture, but they aren't relevant in the console space, or at the very least that ain't what people are talking about. Something else that feels like it isn't spoken about enough is how in recent years there have been very few new IPs on these consoles. Which is weird when you learn that recently there have been articles talking about how the console space has barely experienced growth over the years, but at the same time there is barely anything interesting to draw more people in. This brings up back to me mentioning how the PS Move, the PSVR, and the Kinect were handled poorly all this time. If you don't give proper support to peripherals that potentially could have broad appeal, then you won't bring in new people into your environment. I feel this should be somewhat obvious in light of these publications, and yet here we are with consoles underperforming some 3 years after release and barely any first-party solutions that could involve trying to draw in a wider audience. In other words, if you make the console more interesting to more people, then it's very likely they will buy it. This becomes slightly more significant when you consider the report that games being played the most are old live service games. And why wouldn't they? A lot of these games can be played very casually with many integrating cross progression. That means people are playing the same game on different devices while still retaining the same experience. These devices extend beyond consoles to include mobile, which also happens to be the device most people use almost constantly nowadays. So the big console makers should be focusing on what intrinsic value they can provide rather than what that can be played, seeing as casuals are willing to play whatever, wherever. One such proposition would be the PSVR. You combine it with a joystick or a steering wheel and you can get a more immersive experience that could draw in the VR crowd. Like, here's an idea. Use the concept of Pokemon Snap, an on-rails game themed around photography, let it take place in the Starfield of the Horizon universe, give it VR support, and you got something that might catch the eyes of people. Heck, add VR support to Pokemon Snap while you're at it. Another thing that can be done is bring back the pistol controllers and make arcade shooters, at worst making them out of existing franchises. This could be extra doable with a lot of games getting continuous development and support, so that it could be added in the future, maybe even as paid DLC. The focus of the idea is to bring new things to the table regardless of consoles, because as it currently stands, consoles stop inventing new ways to interact with them. That is, if you aren't named Nintendo. They being at the forefront of console design and innovation for the last few generations. Starting with the Wii, and the incredible original controllers that started the whole motion controller movement for Sony and Microsoft. It also was so great help that they integrated the controller into a substantial amount of their mainline games, like Zelda Twilight Princess and Super Mario Galaxy as examples. The Wii U, while considered a failure, still managed to bring its own share of innovation. Its gamepad allowed for extra functionality to be added to the games, as well as serving as a traditional controller. The overall problem with the console was its lack of first-party support, with the absence of appealing games that would have sold the idea better rather than leave it as a standalone concept. There was a very neat thing about it though, which was that it also had the option to play a game remotely, more specifically playing a game through the gamepad alone. I'm pretty sure this was the feature that inspired the Switch, from its design to even to the promotional material that was used to market it. Like the main selling point of it being that you get a seamless sensation between playing on a handheld device and playing on a big screen. It was this idea of portability that in turn inspired the Steam Deck and everything else that came afterwards. To think that such a revolutionary idea would have come from a failure, as it were. By the way, you probably noticed how Nintendo has somewhat of an inverted relationship with its games, at least when you compare it to Microsoft and Sony. The success of their games is tied to the success of the console, and how the more recent releases became as big as they did, partly because their consoles were widely successful and not the other way around. So at the end of the day, if these companies want to expand the reach of their products and capture more customers, the way to go is to actually create new and interesting things. They can focus on making new IPs, make spin-offs, or make new toys for both developers and gamers to play around with. They make an attempt to shake out the industry by designing new controls or peripherals who probably go a long way in their attempts at enriching the gaming world, rather than keep using the same old strategies over and over again. In turn, that could inspire the indie scene to make even more daring games that push the envelope of creativity. And I'm pretty sure you all have thoughts and ideas as to how these companies can improve. So share them down in the comments below. That will be all from me today. Take care, folks.